So you can do something like this. You can watch a match. You can watch, a loss or even a win in CFN, right? You can take that footage and you can go and you can replicate some of these scenarios that give you trouble, and you can repeat them over and over and over and over again, right? Is it as good as fighting a thinking, living, breathing opponent? Not necessarily, but you don't need that, because oftentimes you're looking for specific situations, right? You're looking for answers to specific situations. This is a tool that you can use to be able to lift a situation from a match that you fought, set it up in training mode, and then practice a concrete answer or two against those options. What up? So, I ran into a few matchups the other day, and I recognized that I was getting cooked pretty bad by some things that I definitely feel like I should have been able to stop. It was like mainly stuff like cheeky headbutt shenanigans and, stuff that I knew I could figure out if I just took the time to lab it. And so that got me thinking a little more generally about training mode, and specifically about drills. So Street Fighter 6 has an incredibly robust training mode, and it's full of great options you can use to shore up holes in your game plan. But let's get real. As good as training mode is, it's intimidating as shit, right? There's just menus and on menus, there's tons of menus and options and sub menus. And to be fair, they added tooltips and stuff like that. They did their best to explain all these things, but there's just so much. It's overwhelming. And there's only so much you can do to make a billion options less overwhelming. So I feel like that's kind of across the board an issue in Street Fighter 6, but all things considered, it's a comparatively small issue. So kudos, Capcom, you did your thing. Now, a lot of these options and things that you can use to kind of like record and playback and set situations up, all of that stuff has been in Street Fighter's past. A lot of that was in Street Fighter 5's training mode. But the explanations were not there. Like they kind of improved the training mode as time went on and the game matured, which was nice. But one thing they did that I absolutely hated was that they'd add in stuff and they wouldn't explain a damn thing. So clearly they got the memo. They understood that, like, all right, we got to tell people how to use this stuff. Good. They did that because, like, literally, unless you were already a lab monster and just like lived in training mode 100% of the time, then good luck figuring out a lot of that stuff. So, which kind of brings us to my next point, because if you're watching this, I'd fashion a guess that you're probably not the type to lab it up on your own. You probably either A, are not sure how, or B, you do training mode for like combos and things like that, and you pretty much just kind of leave it to God, so to speak, in ranked and casual matches and Battle Hub to kind of actually figure out some of these other things and to kind of like get practice against situations and things, relying on the people that you play to present these options. And that's not a bad way to do this, honestly, because players will show you this stuff, especially if the tools are working. So I guess in lieu of that, there are better ways to do that, all right? And like, there's no shade if you're not the kind of player to go in and utilize training mode to its fullest, okay? Those folks, myself included, we're kind of a different breed. And like I said, no shade, right? I'm here to help as best I can. Like I said, I'm going through the same scenario right now with some of the matchups and things that I need to sort out and shore up too. So just know I got your back, but also so does Daddy Capcom this time. They got your back too, because in this training mode, they've got a whole menu called Simple Training Settings. In this menu, most of these options are there for people just like yourself, presumably. I don't want to assume, but presumably they're there for people who may not know how to utilize like the record and playback feature effectively. And they kind of set you up with some predetermined scenarios, and it explains it on the tooltip down at the bottom. I'm pointing to my screen like you can see what the hell I'm looking at. So like, for instance, anti-air practice, it tells you right above, like where it says confirm and back and go to basic settings. It's a preset for practicing anti-airs against jump attacks. Pretty straightforward stuff, right? So the beautiful part is that you can just jump right in. Yeah, all this stuff is just set up and ready for you to use. It's beautiful. Now there are some downsides, and we'll get into those shortly, but there's also ways to reverse engineer what they have here to kind of shore up those weaknesses and utilize these in a more effective way for everybody. And I say that because you'll notice that if you go to anti-air practice, like you saw before, Honda was the character that I selected as my training dummy, right? So one limitation, at least for anti-air practice, is that it has to utilize Ryu, which is fine. Honestly, for most people, when you're setting this stuff up, it doesn't really matter who you're practicing against because the dummy's set to just jump and do a couple of things, and it's perfectly fine. More on that later, but just for now, just know that if you do this, it's going to automatically switch to Ryu first. So we'll go ahead and we'll do this. Well, we'll read this first. So it says Ryu will randomly switch between neutral jumps and forward jump attacks. Practice intercepting the forward jump attack with an anti-air of your own, obviously anti-air practice. Additionally, enabling recording slots 4 through 6 will add horizontal movement and a forward dash into throw mix-up for Ryu's moveset, forcing you to focus on both air and ground, which is great. Applying this preset will overwrite Ryu's recording slots. Now, of course, it's going to use Ryu, so it'll just replace Honda with Ryu, as you'll see here. And it just starts, right? Bam. So he starts hopping at you. He's neutral jumps. I'm playing on pad, so forgive me. My reactions are going to be kind of bunk, but I'll do my best. But yeah, so it's pretty straightforward. It's like, all right, you just get the timing down for anti-airing with things, and you can choose what you want to anti-air with. But that's kind of the goal, right? Easy peasy, pretty straightforward stuff. So what they also said was you can expand on what Ryu does by going over to recording settings, and you'll notice there's a whole list of stuff here, right? So you'll see that slots 1, 2, and 3 are on. So that's what Ryu was doing. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn these off, except for the first one. We're going to observe Ryu and see what he actually does. So the first option is forward jump. He throws a medium kick and he does a backwards jump to kind of keep his same positioning. Good. All right. Let's turn that off. Let's turn on slot 2 and see what changes. Okay. So slot 2 is just Ryu doing a neutral jump. Good, because people will absolutely try to just neutral jump on you, and learning how to deal with that, if you can, is also good too. In this particular circumstance, you might not even want to swing at the neutral jump, right? Because a lot of players will use that to kind of bait you to do something. So it's good training to do nothing in this particular circumstance. Great choice. Let's turn on slot 3. See, this is subtle, but it's super important. So slot 3 is literally nothing. Do nothing. And if you notice, you can see the little green arrow, like the play button over there where it says slot 3. It's kind of like it's only 19 frames of an action. So they only recorded a brief amount of time for him to sit still, but it just plays that over and over and over and over again. So the whole point of all this is that it will just play all of these things at random. And if you'll notice over on the side there, it says random selection rate. So what does that mean? Random selection rate basically means how often will it select this option when choosing randomly. It kind of prioritizes these random options that it will choose from, and it kind of tells you how often it will do these different actions. With the higher the number, I believe it says down at the bottom, the higher the value, the more likely a slot will be selected. So for instance, slot 3 was him standing still. Most opponents are not constantly in motion. Good ones. Most people will stand still at some point. So it's choosing that the most, because if you noticed, it was a very brief, like 19 frames of him standing still, right? So that can kind of be like people kind of like stopping and stuttering and moving about to kind of give you a second to kind of visualize what's happening. So it's not just a constant stream of like jumping forward and backward and a whole bunch of nonsense like that, right? So that's also a way that you can kind of further tweak how the opponent does what he does when you're setting these up. Because like, let's say you're used to fighting people who don't stand still. You can turn that down and Ryu will just do everything else. He'll just be constantly in motion, jumping and doing whatever. So we haven't gone through and we haven't talked about these other 3 slots. So we saw what slots 1, 2, and 3 were. It was like a forward jump into a medium kick and then a back jump, a neutral jump, and then slot 3, of course, was just standing still. So let's see what slot 4 is. Okay, slot 4 is kind of like slot 3, except it's him walking forward for a brief period of time, just repeated over and over and over again. All right, let's see what slot 5 is. Okay, makes sense. Slot 5 is literally the opposite. It's him walking backwards for 15 frames over and over and over again. All right, and let's see what slot 6 is. Okay, so slot 6 is, as the menu mentioned, it's a dash up and to throw, to kind of give you a way to practice focusing on the ground and watching for the jump and then responding to the jump. I remember back in Street Fighter V, it was about the time Luke was out, and I was playing on hitbox, which you can kind of see. I'm trying to point to it. You can kind of see my hitbox right about there on my shelf. It required some training to get like DPs and things like that down because, you know, different sort of muscle memory. So I started doing drills like this back then, and I would set the dummy up to kind of like basically do what you shades of what you saw here, kind of move backwards and forwards, jump, neutral jump, throw attack. So I got used to kind of like reacting, like watching the ground, focusing on the ground, and then reacting to the jump, watching the character leave the ground. Because it's Street Fighter, right? Most characters, when they leave the ground, there's not a whole lot they can do to change their trajectory. Now, in the case of characters who can, like, you know, Blanca or Chun-Li, they can, or Bison even, characters who can drastically change where they go in the air, those are things that you can turn on and off. Like, notice, we've got 2 more slots down here, right, that we can use to add more options. So for instance, we can come down to slot 7, right? So let's see, what would you generally add? So Ryu is set to dash up and throw, right? So maybe let's set Ryu to dash up and throw like crouch medium kick, right? Before you do this, one thing that you're going to want to make sure you set is, so recording trigger, when it's set to automatic, the moment you click that slot, it's going to start recording, and whatever you're going to do, you have to do it immediately. Otherwise, there's going to be a big chunk of time where Ryu's just kind of standing there doing Ryu shit, which you may not want. So what I recommend is that you set it to on input. And what that basically means is that when you click the slot that you want to record on, the game will wait for you until you actually actively press a button. Now, the moment you press a button, it starts recording what you're doing. And then you can pause and stop whenever you're done, right? So what you generally want to do when you're using the record feature in this game, or any game for that matter, is that you want to do your option as cleanly as possible. And then the moment you've done it, hold down back so you're blocking. Or just straight back if you want to stand block specifically. It's a good practice to get into if you're trying to say practice setups or wake up options and things like that. You want to make sure that you're not getting hits where hits are not actually possible because you didn't block in time. So it's just a good habit to kind of get into practice now, and I'll show you what I mean. So you noticed, I click the slot and you'll see where the green play button was before. It says recording, slot 7, preparing. Preparing means that it's waiting for your input. So what we're going to do, we'll try to get it. If we don't get it first try, you'll just do it again. But we're going to dash up, low, medium, kick, and then we're going to crouch block right after that. So let's try it now. Oh, see, I fucked it up. That's okay. If you screw it up, you can just go right back to the same slot, pick it again, and you're right back where you were. So we're going to dash up, low, medium, down, back, stop. So 143 seconds is kind of a lot of time, but that's okay. Not a big deal, because honestly, when you're throwing out buttons like that, generally you want to be blocking afterwards anyway. That's pretty natural. All right, so now that that's added to the list, let's throw it in and let's see how it looks. So we're gonna go up here. We're going to turn this option on. Let's turn on a few other ones. Screw it, let's just turn them all on and see. Let's see how often it does it. So right now, it is set to it's set to 1 as far as random selection rate. Let's turn that up a bit because we kind of wanted to do it more often, because that's a pretty common thing that we tend to do, right? Let's turn the throw. Let's see, hit X. We'll turn this up to 3, or 2 rather, and we'll turn the medium kick up to 3. All right. That puts it in line with most of these other things. So now let's see how this looks. We've added another option. So in addition to all the other stuff he was doing, now Ryu will also do a crouching medium, a dash up, specifically crouching medium kick. So let's just fire it up. Oh, ha! I'm glad this happened. So one thing you want to do in this game, when you want the dummy to actually start, doing the things in this list, you have to make sure to start replay. And then he'll start doing it. Yeah, all right. Neutral jump. There it is. You can just kind of like spar with it, try to stop it as best you can, you know. And specifically for this drill, you want to focus on watching the ground, which is why we added the extra option where he'll try to snipe your feet and catch you with throws. If you want to respond, you want to like react to him leaving the ground while you're watching specifically him on the ground, so you can see the smaller things, right? Soapbox moment here for just a second. Jumping is a big action, right? That's why it's generally not recommended that you jump a lot in these matches unless you know your opponent can't stop the jump, because you're kind of, for like the amount of time you're jumping, you can't really do much. You can't air block, and at least not in Street Fighter 6. You can attack stuff, but you're still vulnerable to get hit. So that's a pretty big commitment anytime you leave the ground, right? Even if you can change your trajectory, that it severely limits the options that you have that you can do, because there's so much stuff that you cannot do in the air. So it makes more sense to focus your attention, like kind of, you know, think about your mental stack, focus more of your mental stack on all the things that can happen on the ground. And you're just watching, kind of like out of your peripheral vision, to see if your opponent even left the ground. Then you want to fire off your 1 or 2 anti-air options, right? Because generally there's only like 2 or 3 buttons that you'll even hit in that circumstance. That's kind of a good way to think about neutral and anti-airs in general. You're not watching for the jump. You're not watching the space where he's jumping. You're kind of looking, like soft focusing at the space around the character, and you're just watching for them to jump. You know, it's a drastic change in the character's animation when they leave the ground, right? So that's all you're really looking for. And this will help you get the timing down. So it's just an automatic reflex almost, right? But it will also help you keep an eye on the stuff on the ground, which is why you want to throw in those options like that. So let's up the ante a bit. So we added the dash up, crouch medium kick. Let's see what else we can add. We'll keep it simple. We're going to set Ryu to walk backwards, just a step, right? And then we're going to have him solar plexus strike in. So let's try that now. Bam, just like that. Easy. Wow. Literally exact same amount of time. Cool. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll turn this one up. Well, we don't want to do it quite as much as the medium kick. So let's set this one to 2 as well. Better yet, let's do this. Let's turn this one up. Let's turn this up to 4, see how often he does it. And we'll set this to 3. All right, so now we got a full suite. 8 things that this character will do that we can practice against. So not only can we practice against anti-airs, but now also we can practice in context, dealing with jumps and also dealing with stuff on the ground. Like you can watch your spacing, so you can be at a good spacing to deal with jumps, and also learn to be at the spacing to deal with stuff like dash up, crouch medium kick, right? So let's turn this all on. Let's see how this looks in context. And all you're really going to do is you're going to spar with it. You know, you're going to try to just like, you can do whatever you want to it. I see. Yeah. All right, neutral jump, good. Bam, good. There you go. And your drill is going to look something like shades of, something like this. So the dummy will block when it's appropriate, notice. The dummy will jump at you kind of at random, so to speak. He's going to do just stuff that kind of like a mid-level Ryu would generally do, more or less. All you're really looking to do is kind of just like shut out the stuff, practice shutting out the stuff that doesn't matter, so you can focus on dealing with the things that do matter, like not getting thrown, dealing with jumps. You're not practicing combos. You're just trying to, practice stuff like that. When you see a Ryu do something like that, now you can actually practice nailing his feet when he overextends, or, you learn to be at the proper spacing that if he jumps at you, or if he dashes at you, you can check the dashes, and you can practice dealing with these different situations. And you'll notice, like sometimes Ryus do that constantly, right? They jump from spaces where it's gross. And specifically, they chose medium kick because it's a cross-up. So if you're too close and the dummy does that jump, it's timed so that it will hit you on cross-up if it's able to. This is all training on not just anti-airs, but spacing at this point, right? So here's the beautiful part about all this. I mentioned earlier, right, that you run into situations where like, all right, this is great. We're practicing against Ryu. We're getting training against cross-ups, general jumps, and dash-up throw, things that most characters can do to some degree, right? But maybe there are scenarios where like you don't want to practice against Ryu. Maybe you want to do this against Chun-Li or Blanca or Honda or whoever, right? Well, so now you basically took anti-air practice, which you can see these options are set as anti-air practice, so you can see what the game put for you. But these are options that we just learned. You can record your own. You can record the dummy to do whatever you want. So you can record the dummy to walk forward and backwards. You can record the dummy to dash up throw. You can record the dummy to jump in place, jump forward, jump backwards, any of this stuff, right? We added these options in with what it gave us, but you can set all of these individually, including the random selection rate. Maybe you run into a lot of Chun-Lis who like to neutral jump like 5 times in a row. That's silly, but maybe they do. Maybe you see that a lot. That's okay. You can set that up to look exactly like what you fight, right? So you can do something like this. You can watch a match. You can watch, a loss or even a win in CFN, right? You can take that footage and you can go and you can replicate some of these scenarios that give you trouble, and you can repeat them over and over and over and over again, right? Is it as good as fighting a thinking, living, breathing opponent? Not necessarily, but you don't need that because oftentimes you're looking for specific situations, right? You're looking for answers to specific situations. This is a tool that you can use to be able to lift a situation from a match that you fought, set it up in training mode, and then practice a concrete answer or two against those options. And or you will learn that there really isn't a whole lot you can do. And so like maybe the answer is just defend or jump out of the way or just reposition yourself so they don't get the pressure or the plus frames or whatever, right? It's all about gathering data. This is a tool that helps you more effectively gather data, and it works for everybody. So I really applaud Capcom for taking the time to put in a feature like this, but also like not only explain how it's used to a degree with the tooltips down at the bottom, but also help new players be able to set this stuff up for themselves and really begin to learn and break down. This is one of the big things that really helped me kind of sort out such scenarios in the game that I was kind of flummoxed by. So hope it does the same for you. And on that note, we're gonna call it there. I appreciate you watching and I hope this helped, and I'll see you on the next one. Deuces.